Hello everyone and welcome to Live with Janome. I'm Miriam Coffey. I'm an education specialist here at Janome America, and welcome to my studio. Today I am really excited because we are doing a really exciting project that I created, and it's called My Heart Beats for Janome. It is using the Variable Zigzag. And the Variable Zigzag is a Janome exclusive feature. So that's what makes it so special. And it's a really fun project and a really fun technique that, in my opinion, isn't used quite as often as it should be, because you can do some really cool stuff. Primarily, it's really good for free motion quilting to add some texture in sort of art quilts or landscape quilts. I do have some examples I'm going to show you, but I've also used it in regular quilts, and it can look really cool. It can add a really nice layer of texture. So Variable Zigzag is a way of changing the width or variable, the width of your zigzag by using your knee lift. Now you can't do Variable Zigzag without a knee lift, so you have to make sure you have that pulled out. And when you put pressure on your knee lift as you're sewing, when you're in the proper setting, it's going to change the width, and it's going to go wider or narrower or wider or narrower. And we have it so that it can either get wider in the middle, or where one side stays stationary and the other gets wider or narrower on the opposite side. So let's go over the project here. So this is the project. It's a little pin cushion, and it can be done in any size, but I have it done here at the 6.5 inches. So let's go and switch. I want to show you a few examples of Variable Zigzag. So here is a landscape of Variable Zigzag, and I used the left one where the left-hand side stays stationary and the right gets wider or narrower. So I would line up the left side of my needle at this intersection between these two pieces of fabric, and then the amount of pressure would change the width of my zigzag. And that's what gives it this texture and sort of organic feel to it. This is another example of another landscape quilt. So I'm going to actually show it to you large scale first. So this is the quilt. This is a quilt that I did with my mom. And it is done with, she created the batik. Let's get the camera. Yeah, so she created the batik, and then I stitched on top of it. So I'm going to pull it down so you can kind of see a little bit more of it. But the Variable Zigzag is all of this, all done on the outside of the trunk here, and then along the base of the landscapes and the mountains. So you can get some really cool texture. I love the way it lines the edge of the tree. I think it really helps that tree pop a lot, and it really adds a nice dimension to it. I also use the same technique to free motion along within the tree trunk itself. So those are just a few examples of Variable Zigzag. But let's go over a few of the supplies that we're going to need. So we're going to need some thread. We're going to need red and black thread. We're also going to need a red and a black bobbin. We're also going to need some basic sewing supplies like your scissors, some thread snips. And then we're going to need some marking utensils. So fabric markers or fabric chalk pens, either will work fine. Sometimes having at least two colors can be nice. I'm also going to be using Sharpies today because it's a lot easier to see on camera than the fabric markers. And then next we're going to need a ruler. or some sort of measuring tool. And then as for fabric, we're going to need a 6.5 inch square. Let's get those out of the way. So we're going to need a 6.5 inch square with a 6.5 inch square of batting. Now this size can actually, the back of your pincushion can really be any size as long as it's the same as the front. So whatever you choose, as you can see, I have done it in several sizes, so I have a variety of sizes here. That's actually, I think you can see it a little bit better in this. So I have a little tower of them, and they're all a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger than the other. You're also going to need some polyfill or ground walnut shells. So here are some. I used the walnut shells for this larger one because it can be really a nice stuffing for pincushions. And then lastly, you're going to need some white fabric. And this is about a 7.5, 8 inch square roughly. You want it a little bit bigger because you do want some excess on the top and the sides so that you make sure that you have plenty of room to square it up if necessary. And then the last two items that we'll need are some needles. Now I have two different types of sewing needles here. I have a standard small needle for sewing the opening closed, and then I have one large needle, and this is for installing the button. We will need two buttons for the front and the back, and that can be any button of your choosing. All right, so now that we've gone over some supplies, let's go ahead and go to the front of the machine, and we're going to stitch it out. So before you get started, it can be beneficial to do some testing. It's always good to test out a new technique before you start your project, because you don't want to get in the middle of something that you care about and then it not be, and then you ruin it because you didn't practice. So I have some test outs here. So this is it. I've played with some different zigzags. So I used the one that goes in the middle here, and then I used the one that is on the left hand side that the right moves up and down. So as you can see, you can get some really cool organic shapes here. All right, so the first thing we need to do is pull up Variable Zigzag within our machine. So I'm using my CM17, and I'm going to go to my home icon. I'm going to go to Sewing Applications, and then I'm going to go to my quilting, which is the middle one at the top here, and select Variable Zigzag. Now there are 6 different options within the Variable Zigzag. We have some that are free motion and some that are used your feed dogs with. We're going to be using the ones with our feed dogs, and we're going to be using this one with the M on it because remember, this is the one that gets wider evenly on the right and the left side. And then this last one is where the left side stays stationary and the right will get wider or narrower. So let's go ahead and select that. And on my scrap fabric, I'm just going to test out. I'm going to speed up just a little bit. Looks like my e-lift got disconnected. So I'm going to put some pressure on my e-lift, and that's what's doing this little jump. So you can see I'm kind of doing those jumping movements. I'm moving my arm, so I'll try to move my arm a little bit bigger so you can kind of see that jump movement. And then if I hold it, I'm going to get a wider zigzag, and I can slowly, gradually taper it down. Just cut our threads. So as you can see, it has, that's when I was holding it at the widest width, which would be in our 9 millimeters, and slowly tapered it down to a straight stitch. Now let's actually switch to the L1 so you can see the difference, because not only am I going to be staying stationary, I'm also going to have it stitched tighter, because when you play with your stitch length, you can get some really cool dense stitching. And you can change this to whatever you want. And when you play with the width, you can also play with the thread weight of the thread. And you can get thicker or a narrow thread, and that can make it either look more delicate or a little chunkier, depending on the look you want. All right. So you can see the difference here. So we had this is closer together, and my left stays stationary, and versus this one where I had the width evenly getting wider on the right and the left side. All right, now that we've done a few test stitch outs, let's go ahead and make some lines on our fabric. So we started with just a plain piece of fabric, but we do have to make a few marks here. So let's get our ruler, and I'm going to just make a line here 1 inch from the edge. And this is just giving me, actually, let's go off of this edge because this is a straighter line. This is giving me my like starting off point. This is just a rough, this could technically be, 1.25 inches, whatever measurement. This is just so that we are not sewing too close to the edge of our fabric. And then we're going to make a line every 3/4 of an inch. And then make our line 3/4 of an inch. And we would continue to mark that until we got to the end, where we started off with our inch and then 3/4 of an inch all the way till you hit the end of your fabric. And now let's go back to the machine, and we're going to stitch it out on our fabric here. So we're going to go right here, and we're going to lower our foot, and I want to make sure that I'm selected the middle because I want to go back to that middle one right here. And we're going to press start, and then I'm going to be using my hand instead of my knee because I'm standing, but you would be using your knee when you are sitting. And then kind of just play around. You do little flicks, that's when you get the little tiny little jumps. And move, hold it, you can slowly taper it down, do some little jumps, or like little flicks. We're going to stop, and then we're going to cut our threads. And then that's our stitch out. And I could keep stitching this until I hit the end, but we're going to jump ahead with the magic of step outs. So now we have this all stitched out. Now all we have to do is make a few new marks. So I started off by drawing a perpendicular line with my stitch line. And I did this just a 1/2 inch from the edge. This is just giving me somewhere to start. So I drew my line here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to make a few marks. So let's actually, I'm going to switch ones. So here we go. So we're going to use this vertical line here as our guide. So we're going to be going and we're going to be flipping and flopping back and forth between 1 inch to 2 inch, 1 inch to 2 inch. So my next one would be 1 inch. So I'm going to be using this as my starting point so that all of my lines match up with each other. I'm also going to use this 1/4 inch mark to line up with my stitch line. So I have my 1/4 inch mark here, and I'm lining it up with a measurement, an inch measurement. So since the previous line was 2 inches, I'm going to start with 1 inch. And now I'm going to jump to 2 inches. And again, 2 inches, 2 inches. And then we're going to flip again. And now we're going to start off with 2 inches because our previous row was 1 inch. So now we're going to our 2 inch mark. Again, lining up a 1/4 inch from our stitch line. And 2 inches and 2 inches. And then now again, we're going to go to use our 1/4 inch. We're going to go 1 inch, 2 inch, 2 inch, 2 inch until all of the fabric is marked. All right, so now that we have the variable zigzag done, let's go ahead and pull up our decorative stitches. We also have to change our threads. So we're going to put our red thread on now. I'm just going to thread this up with my red thread. I'm also going to change my bobbin. I like to change my bobbin. I'm going to do needle down, needle up. I'm going to lock my machine, cut my thread, and then now my machine is threaded. And then let's go ahead and change our bobbin. I like to match my top and bobbin thread sometimes when I'm doing decorative stitches. That way if a bobbin thread comes up, it doesn't cause an issue. And since we want our pincushion to be cute and we want our hearts to look good, I'm going to change to red bobbin thread. All right, so now we have to pull up our decorative stitch. So let's go ahead and go back home, and we're going to select our ordinary sewing. We're now going to select our decorative stitch icon, which is here on the top, and my heart icon, or the heart stitch, is in the kids category. So I'm going to keep turning until I find the kids. And now what I'm going to do is select the heart that I want. Now, if I started stitching this out, I would get a whole row of hearts, but I don't want a whole row of hearts. So I want to isolate a single heart and then add a locking stitch on it. So down here at the bottom, you're going to see this row of hearts, and then you're going to see that's gray. So the row of hearts are blue, and then there's a gray heart, spade, and diamond. I'm going to select that, and that is combining our stitches. So all I have to do is select that heart, and I'm going to add a locking stitch. And now when I stitch it out, so let's just do a little test stitch. So let's actually switch feet here. Let's go ahead and put our F foot on. So let's go ahead and take off our AccuFeed. We're going to put our F foot on. And we're going to tighten this up. So that's why it's good to always do a test. Now I've got a cute little heart. Another thing you can always do is adjust your pressure foot pressure. So we're going to lower our pressure foot pressure. I'm going to see if that looks a little bit better. See, I think that looks a little bit better. See how this other side is more even with than this first one? So that's why you can always, even though the machine may be auto this or auto that, having the ability to override that can be really, really nice. All right, so now I have my front of my pincushion and I have my marks. So all I have to do is line up my dot with my needle. So another thing that I like to do when I'm doing decorative stitches, I always want to put my thread tail on top, because if I have it down underneath my foot, it's going to get caught, and I'm going to have to trim my threads later, which that takes extra time. So now that I'm lined up, that's my start. And then this is when I kind of flick out that thread, and then let's place this next one. And if I need to make a readjustment, let's make a little adjustment there. And then I could just keep, let's see, let's cut the thread again. I could just keep stitching and stitching away until I have all of my hearts done. So now that all of my hearts are done, I have to mark my center point. So when I make my center point, because this is a 6.5 inch square, I know 3 1/4 is my center point. So I have marked a 3.5 inch square and right there in the center, and I'm going to do the same thing for the back. It looks like I just dropped my foot. So let's go ahead and switch to ordinary sewing. Let's grab a different foot here since I dropped my foot. There we go. So now I have marked the back. So I drew a line, an X, finding my center point, and then I stitched it so it's quilted, and so I have a center point so I know where my button's going to go. And that's why we made our center point here, so that both of them, we know where our center points are. Now that I have my center points done, I'm also going to pin around my 6.5 inch square, and this is where I'm going to leave my opening. Sometimes what I like to do when I'm sewing and need to remember to leave an opening, I'll put different types of pins or maybe a different color clip so that I know that at this type of pin, this is where I'm going to start. I'm going to sew around and I'm going to stop at this particular one over here. So now that we have it sewn around, another thing that I like to do to help when you turn a project around and when you're sewing, I like to sew off at a 90-degree angle here from the raw edge to my 1/4 inch marking. This way, when I go around and I turn this inside out, this is going to force that seam allowance into my project, and it's going to make it easier to sew this shut when it comes to that point. So now that we have that sewn, it's time to box our corners. So what we're going to do is, this is where we're at right here. We would have a just normal corner, And now it's time to box them. So to box your corners, the size is going to vary depending on how deep you want your pincushion, but I just wanted it to be a 1/2 inch box. So I've marked here a 1/2 inch. So I'm going off of my 1/2 inch here. So this is my 1/2 inch mark here and my 1/2 inch mark here. And then I'm going to mark around that. And then I would cut this. Find those scissors. And I would do that to all 4 sides. I'm going to cut this. And now what we're going to do, we're going to sew this shut. So what we're going to do is we're going to pinch our corner, making sure that our backing fabric stays on one side and our top fabric stays on the other. And we're going to nestle our seams here. So I have making sure that my backing fabric is on one side and my top of my pincushion is on the other. Nest those seams, and you can use a clip or you can use a pin, whichever you prefer. And then you're just going to sew across like so. And then once you have all 4 corners sewn around, you turn it inside out like that. So you just turn that all the way around, and then you'll stuff it with whatever stuffing you prefer, whether that is the polyfill or whether that is the crushed walnuts, whatever you prefer. You'll stuff that, hand sew that shut. I like to use the ladder stitch. And then once that's done, take your larger needle. So for this one, I used red thread. And then you're just going to go match up. Because you have that X, you're going to go from the back, sew your button down on the top. I normally secure this one first and then attach the back one, and then you can always push it down to make sure that you can secure that knot there. And as you can see, you can do your hearts in either horizontal locations or vertical. So let's actually get a closer shot here so you can see that. So this is when I have my hearts parallel with my heartbeats, and then this one I have them vertical. So you can do them either way, whatever your preference is. I think they look cute either way, so I don't think you'd go wrong with either of them. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video and you're excited and inspired to play with Variable Zigzag, because as you can see, you can get some very different looks with the same technique, from something like this to this larger, more of an art quilt that has some really cool texture in it. And add some really nice dimensions. So I think you guys are going to have a lot of fun playing with this technique. And don't forget to post some pictures of any projects that you have done with Variable Zigzag. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you guys next time. All right, bye-bye.